Welcome to the Tokenomics DAO podcast, where we explore everything tokenomics related, ranging from deep dives on the tokenomics of the newest protocol to demystifying the nuance of building a successful token ecosystem. Our goal is to bring awareness to the importance of tokenomics and the crucial role it plays in defining the success of a protocol, helping make tokenomics relevant for everyone, builders and investors alike. I'm your host, Flo, joined by my co-hosts Jason and or Lovis. Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome to another episode without a guest. We thought we'd do another update because we've worked on a whole lot of things in the last couple of months, and I think there are some really cool changes or concepts or ideas that we have. This is all work in progress, but I feel like it's ready, or we feel it's ready to talk about. And so today we try and cover what our thoughts are in terms of roles and hierarchies of our DAO, of our Discord. We're going to look at how we structure, how we work, how we set ourselves up in teams and the different things that we work on. And then we've progressed a lot on whether we want a token and how to structure that. And then also how rewards and what like payments to contributors are being distributed. So those are kind of the topics I guess we want to touch upon.
Yeah, and so just briefly in the intro, I wanted to kind of lay out why this is important, right? So it was in the I had an excellent conversation with Rockwell Shaw on the last episode, and he made it such a good point that in Web3, we have a dream, right? There's a dream that's yet unrealized, but we have the dream that value accrues to the participants in a community or in a network based on how much value they actually create, right? So it's not because I started it, I get all the money. It's not a winner take all scenario. It's you kind of get what you put in. That's like the underlying thing, and I think that's something that resonates really strongly with all of us in Tokenomics DAO. And we're kind of trying to build a system that rewards value creation, right? And it sounds like a really simple concept, but it turns out when you do it operationally, it's actually not that easy. So, and there's not really that many tools to do it yet. There's a lot of tools being built, and we're experimenting with a lot of them, but we always end up kind of having to make up stuff on our own, because we're not a centralized entity where one person gets to decide, and then the founder, so to say, like all the value accrues to the capital, right, to the founder, like in the classic I don't want to say capitalist system, but I guess in a way that's the case, right? A centralized entity takes financial risk, but in return they get to, so to say, exploit labor in a way, right? They pay them a salary, a fixed salary that doesn't change no matter what they do, except of course if they get fired. And then you promote them every once in a while, but like in very small incremental steps, but always banking on the fact that they will produce way more than you pay them in value. And so here we're trying to do it a little different. We're trying to actually reward value creation.
Well, yeah. But like maybe to add, the employees, of course, they don't have any risk, and many are really happy with that. Right. So I guess a lot of what we are building is right now geared more towards this entrepreneurship. So most of the contributors that we have that are active, that are involved, they're more on that side. And so they are all kind of taking that risk, right? We don't know what this is going to turn into and how this is going to evolve.
That's absolutely. So that's absolutely correct. And that's also, of course, why I don't have maybe it sounded like I have a problem with the capitalist system. I really don't. I think it's at the core that it's like the best system we have. But what they say about democracy, it's the best system we have, but it still sucks, kind of, or something like that. But we're trying to iterate on that, right? We're not trying to build some sort of commune. Actually, quite the opposite. We're trying to reward what people bring in. What Flo said, right? So essentially, this is for people that are very entrepreneurial in spirit, that want to kind of put it all out there and have a high upside potential, but of course at the risk that maybe it doesn't work, right? Or of course, when you look in business, all the new businesses that get started, 90+% of them fail. So I guess the risk here is absolutely similar. Even though, to be fair, I think we've done really well so far this year. We've already have revenue. We've already paid people. We have clients that are happy. But of course, getting this to some sort of scale where several people can actually live off of it, we're still away from that. But we keep growing, we keep working. It's absolutely possible. So one piece, I guess, that we'll talk about here, and there was a lot of changes, is the kind of the Discord roles and the kind of what that says about hierarchy. And I think one point that we discovered, or that we're discovering, is that very few people are genuinely interested in this model that we're just describing, right? Most people want to know exactly what to do and get paid for that, and then they deliver it, and that's it. If you
And
say,
you
hey,
want this fixed payment, right?
Yeah,
they're not.
They want to know what to expect going in, kind of.
No volatility, no risk. They just want $5,000 a month, and let someone else take the risk.
And I think that's because that's the established model in a way. So I think it's just what people are used to. But so what we're really trying to do also with the way that you become a contributor in this DAO is we're trying to filter, right? We're trying to find the people that are willing to, that like this way, right? That we're trying to build, that are on board with it because they see a future in it for themselves and for the project. Basically, I think this is setting the stage.
Yeah. And maybe it starts with the onboarding process, right? So we have this onboarding process where we've established this proof of work model. I think we've talked about this on multiple episodes in the past, but what it comes down to is we thought there must be some, kind of like corporations also have a job interview, an assessment center, tests to check an employee. We kind of need something similar, not exactly the same, but something similar. So the proof of work is you come in and you might be interested in becoming a contributor with Tokenomics DAO. And we then give you, or you can pick a topic, and with that topic, we ask you to write a Tokenomics 101 piece, just like the other 30 odd pieces we've written about different protocols. So we have a template for that, a structure. There's a process on how to go through it, different quality gates on how to get to that stage. And if you create one of the pieces and they're good to publish on our Substack, so they fit in with the rest of the quality, the branding, they're critical, all of that, then you become a contributor, right? So that's kind of the process we have in place for this. So that then brings in a variety of people, right? It will bring in people that have this entrepreneurial spirit. They come in and they pick up tasks. Once they are a contributor, they pick up things, they build their own spaces within the DAO. But then there's others that might, are more like on the instruction side. They were looking for others to tell them what to do, for tasks, for fixed pay, for fixed upfront pay, things like that. So I guess this is where, initially when we started this, or when we started the first months of Tokenomics DAO, we had different roles. We said there's going to be a principal role. Those were the members that founded it, or the ones that we think are super committed to this and we trust them. And then the second, or tier down from that, is team members, and then there's contributors with varying responsibilities and levels of trust. And what happened when contributors came in, they thought, or they saw this hierarchy that we set up of team and contributors. So the hierarchy levels above them, they saw that as, oh shit, I need to get approval from these people to do something. And so it took us a while to actually figure that out, that's something that stopped them from engaging and doing stuff and making proposals and picking up work. because they always thought like, oh, there's these other hierarchies. I don't want to step out of my range. I better ask for approval or wait for someone to tell me what to do. And so this went on for some time, and then someone within the DAO kind of addressed it, and we said like, yeah, you're right. That's actually not how we want to run. That's not what we want it to be. And I guess that triggered the whole change.
Right, and there's a tricky balance, right? So, and that's also where I kind of jumped in into the discussion, because at first when you're like, oh, we don't want hierarchy, then I'm in the camp of like, well, yes, we do. You need hierarchy, right? You need order. I mean, you don't need a I guess how do we come to it in the discussion? It's already been like a month ago, but it's like it's not about authority, right? It's about leadership. So it's you do need leaders to kind of step up and be able to own the outcomes, right? And to be able to own an outcome, you also need to be accountable, you need to be responsible, right? You need to show up. And so I do think that leaders need to have a role, right? It's because otherwise you just make it harder for them to be identified. So that's why I think we then came to this thing where like, well, clearly there needs to be different roles because people have different skill sets and they take care of different areas of responsibility of stuff that needs to get done. But it's not about asking for permission, right? It's not about, I'm the owner and you have to do what I say. Like, that's not what we want, right? We want the collaboration, but of course, efficient collaboration, that has some shape of leadership or some guidance and built in.
Yeah. And I think we went like back and forth on this for some time because, I mean, like, you don't have to have these formal descriptions within Discord to see who's the leader, right? Oftentimes you'll identify a leader through his actions, right? He'll be the one leading. He'll just go and suggest stuff and pull through stuff. And that's how you see him. But yeah, of course, that's not very descriptive, I guess, and can also be quite chaotic if you don't name them. So what we thought is instead of this vertical structure that we have, like vertical in terms of we have the contributor role, the team role, and the principal role, we thought like, let's group only in like one layer or two layers and have the contributors, they're all kind of equal within that. And then there's different teams that they work in. And so there's a publishing team, right? Those are the ones that take care of what we post on Twitter or Substack or YouTube or the podcast, editing that, making sure we decide what we do here. And so there's a team for that. And those teams are sort of small enough for the team members to figure out their leadership and internal, maybe like call it soft hierarchy amongst each other. But then we don't need to explicitly name that, right? So we think that's sort of an improvement, right? Because now you have these different teams, and within the teams, it's actually not one single individual that you have to ask for permission, but it's more like, well, you just got to get feedback from the group, from all the others that are in that group of the publishing team. Right? So if you want to change something to the publishing process, well, then you don't have to go to a principal and ask him for approval. You'll just suggest the idea and discuss it within the publishing team and get consensus within that team. And I think this kind of in this decentralized work setting only works if these teams are small enough. So it's only like a group of, I don't know, maybe 5, and then you need a new team. So those were sort of the thoughts on this role concept, right? So we're breaking it down from this quite vertical structure to a more horizontal way, and then grouping it into these teams. So now we've come up with a bunch of teams for publishing, consulting, Tokenomics Hub, education, community, strategy, and treasury. And yeah, people can work within these teams, and then they can get the role of that team. And so within that team, we don't have any like formal leadership roles. It would just be based on activity and value creation. So if someone has been in there and created a lot of value, then yeah, he gets to keep the role. And new people who have, like, say there's a new contributor comes in and he gets really involved in the publishing, has some really good ideas, stuff like that. Then after some time, he could get into that role via a nomination process. So some other publishing team member, he would suggest him to be joining the team. And then someone else who has that role would second it. And so that's kind of this new structure that we thought of. And I think, yeah, it removes this immediate sense of hierarchy. I can't do something, and replaces it with something like more flexible and group oriented. I don't know, but that's kind of what the thoughts are on that.
Yeah. Although, I mean, not although, but, and in consulting, we have, consulting is well, you see the category existing machines, right? So publishing, consulting are existing machines, but that doesn't mean that they're done optimizing either, right? So we just had this discussion yesterday to make the process of kind of qualifying new consultants to become full consultants, so to say, to like kind of define that a little bit more, because we do have some consulting gigs. It's not an overwhelming amount. We have easily enough people right now that can handle them, but contributors also join very much explicitly with the intent of doing consulting, because it's a very straight path to earning money, which is understandable, even though, disclaimer, consulting doesn't scale like other things, right? Paid content and so forth, and SaaS scales way better. So just join the DAO to do consulting, but also come with ideas on scaling infinitely through media and software. But anyway, so basically what we do is we have several people that can handle consulting projects all on their own, because they have experience from even before this DAO, and just know how to do this. They're very well versed also in tokenomics, and they know how to use our tools. They've been around for a while to see kind of what we got in our arsenal, in our toolbox. And then what we're doing with new people is that they basically shadows one of the more experienced people, and they don't have to do this for free. They do get paid some, and it basically comes down to the shadow and the consultant to say, hey, we split the bounty, so to say, this like this, and then they find some agreement. But so now it's like, well, how many shadow projects do I have to do before I can become a full consultant? And what kind of what do I have to do to prove myself? People ask about that, so we're trying to make that. We're trying to write something down, right? And then of course we'll iterate on that probably many more times. And I can see that in the publishing teams and the other teams, it'll become kind of a similar process in a way, even though probably maybe less project focused, because consulting just always is project focused in the sense that you have a client that you're trying to achieve a goal for, and there's a beginning and an end point for that. And publishing probably less so, but yeah, we'll figure that out.
Yeah, maybe we don't have to be that strict in the other teams, right? Maybe it's just something where we have like client facing activities,
yeah,
or more critical activities where we have like light hierarchies within teams. But I think even though we're kind of like, we got rid of the hierarchies and now we're thinking about adding more, I think flattening it and making it more horizontal instead of vertical helps for people to get involved, figuring out where they want to get involved, and identifying or reaching consensus among the team members, right? And finding out from them. And this is really what we want, right? This is because we had that at the beginning. Like, many people came into the DAO and they would always DM me, right? They would always DM me and say like, hey, Phil, what can I do? What can I work on? Do you have any tasks? Can you review this? Can we talk about this? And I was always like, well, it's good that you reach out to me. Thanks. But would be even better if you'd reach out to the community, to all the other contributors, and align and gain consensus among them, because that's the only way we can scale. If this is like an end-to-end connection, and not a end to flow connection where
Yeah.
because that ultimately is the model where you have this centralized controlled hierarchy, right? And I'm not the CEO of this, and I don't want to be. And I think we can achieve much better results if everyone has kind of like an equal say.
Yeah.
And can state that, and that is encouraged.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think in the beginning phases, you and me and some people that have been around, Mason, Ariel, Vinicius, so forth, like young. I'm not trying to leave anybody out.
You will.
And all the ones that I forget to mention, we are like maybe like the training wheels, I guess. Like we're not trying to tell you what to do, but we're also trying. But of course, we have to also optimize for quality, right? The stuff that happens here, and especially if it goes outward facing, has to fulfill a standard, right? So that's why, for example, with the content we publish, there are people ultimately who are kind of quality gates, right? And then but so doing that at scale is a challenge, right? And we're figuring it out. And we kind of the thing that I like about it is we've like come up with hypotheses, we test them for a little bit, and then we're like, oh, this worked, this didn't, next month it'll be different again, right? And so as it grows, I think it gets better and better.
Yeah.
But we absolutely, and so what we're sharing today, what Flo said in the beginning, like work in progress, right? This is our current thinking, but there was a lot of changes. So I think it's worth summarizing, but knowing that next month some stuff will be different again.
and I think there always will be. I don't think we'll ever come to the stage where this is done, right?
Yeah.
So the same way that big corporations like SAP, they do reorg after reorg after reorg, we kind of will have to change as well. And iterate on what we're doing. We're just trying to do it in a better way, so that it's more like in this peer-to-peer fashion, right? So anybody can come up with a suggestion, and then we'll talk amongst each other. It's not this like you give feedback and then it goes up the ranks to the hierarchy. The CEO decides and tells everyone, okay, this is what we're going to do, and then it slowly trickles down. And you, the employee, you're the last to figure out what has changed, but you have no say in it. So that's really what we're trying to avoid. This like top-down style of going through and managing. So I kind of really like this current ideology, working mode, whatever, that we have established, right? Taking these small steps, like figuring something out, trying it out, testing it, and if it doesn't work, we're gonna try something else or iterate and build upon it.
Yeah, and then I think the hard part is going to be letting go also at some point, right? So I'm not trying to call you out, and same problem with me. Like I'm trying to stay on top of all the topics, right? And you can see here in the list, initial member Flow is on every line. But that's just the reality of it, right?
To be,
it's the reality of it. In the beginning, just like in the startup, like the initiators, founders, whatever you call them, they have to do all the things. But then we're trying to do this desperately to get it to work on its own, and then only be kind of an advisor to it, if at all. Ideally, it works completely by itself. So
yeah.
But then, of course, you also have to let go at some point. You're like, well, I wish you would have done it a different way. It's like, yeah, I mean, somebody else is going to do it different than you, right? So
exactly.
you have to be okay with it at some point.
Yeah. So I think it's that's kind of cool. And maybe it's worth mentioning the machines, right? This I don't know where we got this name from, but I think Ariel sent this sort of a business book or something like that. And we thought, hey, within the DAO, these different teams, we can categorize them roughly into three categories. One is the machines or the parts of the DAO that are functioning. We call them the existing machines. So those are the things that they work fairly well, even though they're not perfect. Nothing is ever finished, I guess. But publishing and consulting are the ones that we've sort of set up. They work well, right? So we know what to do when a client reaches out. We know sort of what pricing ranges we have. We know what scope we have. We know how to deliver stuff. We know how to pick and choose consultants. That's all sort of established in a way. So those are the existing machines, and they're run by teams. They're, we need to send out scope documents and assign consultants to projects, and same for publishing, right? We need to make sure that every second Tuesday we publish a new article, and that happens in good quality, that podcasts are edited and published, and we send out a tweet for everything that we do, right? So this all falls under these machines, and they're fairly well set. Then we have what we call it machine maintenance. Those would be like all the stuff that consists of operating and improving the operations of our DAO, like treasury, so that we make sure that we pay people. The strategy, thinking ahead a little bit, like launching our token and designing that. And then community, like defining this whole onboarding process, the proof of work that we talked about, which also is a lot of work, and is really, really important to how we run. And so that's the second category. And the third category is this new machine. And this is something I think is super interesting in what we're building, is that we want to really, everyone who comes into Tokenomics DAO and becomes a contributor, we want to give them the opportunity to use Tokenomics DAO sort of like a platform or stage or an incubator. We're looking for a word for it. We still haven't really found it, but the idea is you can come in and you're a contributor and you have this great idea, and it's something around tokenomics, and you would like to work with us as the community, as the fellow contributors. You want to use our publishing platforms, our knowledge, and build upon something that we've done. Then you can go ahead and do that, right? So it works with, you come up with a project proposal for a new machine, and yeah, then you go and do it. And we're still thinking through how we're going to reward that, right? Does the creator of this project get like a share of the future revenues from it because he's created it? How much does the DAO get? How much does the team that works on it get from that, what is created? And so these are these new machines. And one of the new machines is obviously Tokenomics Hub, and under Tokenomics Hub falls what we have launched beginning of this month, the Tokenomics Design Framework. All right, so this is something we've created, and we thought this is something new that we're building, right? Because it's not really part of consulting, it's not really part of publishing, it's something in between, something new that we're building. And yeah, it's brisk to build something like that, and the people who do it and pull it through and do that, they should be rewarded for that. And we want to really encourage anybody who comes in to pick up a topic. If they see, hey, I think we should really do this, then go and take that, build that machine, and you're the owner of that machine, right? And you can define what happens within it. And yeah, I think that summarizes these three categories that we have in which the teams fall.
Yeah, right. And then as the new machines kind of become more established, and they eventually be transitioned into an existing machine, and then it'll be more about maintenance and so forth. But
yeah,
so I'm curious then how that's going to go, right? Because then there'll still be feature development and stuff like that on those. But yeah, for now, I think it's a really excellent snapshot. And I think the opportunity that somebody has to come into the DAO and propose building a new machine and kind of lead that project, build a team from the contributors inside, and then have the ability to launch it to an existing following, audience, community, whatever you call it, is really cool. Because I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started many things. Most of them fail, as these things go. But finding the initial audience to launch something to is really probably the hardest part, right? Building something is actually easier once you know what to build, and an audience, a community can help you figure out what to build, right? So
yeah. So like maybe to explain, like for this Tokenomics Hub or the Tokenomics Design Framework, right? But like we started with the first idea of this in March, and then it just like bounced around in the DAO, and it sort of formed and got better and more concrete and more mature, and we kept adding stuff. And yeah, then we had like a lot of different versions of this that we created, and that came out, right? And many different people of the DAO contributed with ideas, with stuff to it, and then when we had it created, right, that was also a team working on it, and then we were able to publish it to Twitter followers. We did a podcast about it on all these platforms and through existing machines. So in the Tokenomics Hub, we're actually leveraging existing machines like consulting and publishing. So we can tap into these things that makes it a lot easier for us to launch something like that, right? If I would have gone and started this Tokenomics Hub on my own without anything Tokenomics DAO, I think it would have been a lot harder to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. So how do we, I guess maybe we can pivot into how do we reward for all this stuff, right? So because there's like currently there's like two main different things.
Yeah.
We have cash and we have token. I guess we haven't launched token yet, but we're trying to figure out,
Yeah. It
how
all
do
comes
we
together.
reward value, right?
Yeah.
All this value we've been talking about.
So yeah, I guess the value, and we've been talking about this also for like for a long time in figuring out how we can actually do it. How, like the problem I guess was with rewarding value creation or value add is how do you measure it, right? How do you actually determine who did what, and how do you reach consensus among different people for that? And so when we had these roles, and I think the roles were like a good step to get there, right? The publishing team and the consulting team, the Tokenomics Hub team, and all these different teams, they are key to getting to that, because only if you have a small enough group of people can you, within a reasonable amount of time, reach consensus, right? If you have 100 people, it's going to be really, really hard to reach that consensus. But if it's 5, they know each other, they work with each other every day, it's going to be a lot easier. So here, kind of how we do it, and this is like super basic, right? We tried this with DWork. They didn't have the exact features that we needed. We tried it with Collabland, I think, and it also didn't work, or we weren't really happy with it. So we came up with our own spreadsheet, and we're lucky that we have this guy that's really good at spreadsheets. So he built this, Tyler, thank you. And he, it's what we do. We have the different roles every month, and then here, the team basically, they together add what the value adding activities were that they have done. So in their mind, so if September, we're going to copy this sheet, and every team adds the value adding activities for that month. And then we're going to add who contributed to it. Right. So I worked in almost all teams, in the publishing team here in this case, together with Young and Lovis. And so this is then like, yeah, people just add that. And then here we'll say we have an allocation. And this allocation is to distribute ownership and or cash rewards, right? So if you think about it, we're going to decide how we're going to distribute 100% of this month's ownership. And so maybe up here, this is more clear, right? We're going to say we have a token reward of 20,000 tokens. We don't have a token yet, but that's just, think of it that way, right? So we're going to have 20,000 tokens, which might be 2% of our total token supply. And we will distribute them in the month of August, or we'll distribute or we don't know that yet. We're going to distribute $1,000 of cash as well. So then with that being said, now with this distribution that I just said, we're going to try and go through and decide who becomes, or not becomes, who gets what percentage of this total amount of tokens that we're going to distribute, right? So there's 20,000 tokens, and we want to find out which team member gets what. So we do this in these steps. So step 2 is we will decide which members have worked in a particular team, and then we're going to break up which team gets what percentage of these 20,000 tokens. Right. So in this case, we've decided that the consulting team and the publishing team, they should both get 20%. Tokenomics Hub team should also get 20%, and so on and so forth. Then we go on like that, right? So this is initial suggestion. We're actually, I think in September, we're going to do it like that. We're going to copy August's distribution or allocation, and they're just going to start on that. And then Lovis has found this
Yeah, I can.
Non-democratic process. Maybe you can walk us through that one.
Yeah, I mean, well, it is democratic, right? But it's not a. It's just
Yeah.
not a yes/no vote. It's people indicating their resistance to a proposal. So if you think about the left side as being a proposal, right? So people have put what value they created. They've put their name on the list, and then they have possibly also changed the percentage allocation. So if there's a disagreement with any of this, and this is actually labeled slightly incorrectly, so 1 should be no disagreement, 5 should be strong disagreement. So then you would give it, say, if you're like, well, what did Flo do? Like, I don't like that, right? So then I can put a 5, for example, and then that means I will not I'm not consenting, so to say, to this as it's proposed. And then what's the thing that happens from that is we just have to talk about it, right? If I'm pretty okay with it overall, I would give it a 1 or a 2. That means, yeah, maybe 2 means, well, it's not perfect, but I'm okay with it. I'll go along with it. And basically, so what it does is for each line, you can add up the numbers of resistance that people are feeling, and you'll see if the numbers are low, that means it's a go. If the numbers are high, then there's more discussion needed. So it just gives you more data to work with, right? You can, because otherwise you're like, hey, this is the token distribution proposal. Do you agree? Right? And he's like, well, no, I don't, because there's one thing in the August distribution that I don't like, one little thing. But there's like, in a yes/no vote, in a normal democratic vote, there's like no avenue to say, hey, let's change this one little thing, and then it's a pass, right? Then it's a good. And so this gives you just more
Nuance.
Yeah, more nuance, and it also doesn't need to be then discussed with everybody necessarily. It could literally just be the people that are on that line, right? So like here you see a 4 that Flo put for education, and I think the comment was, well, nothing's launched in August. And it's like, well, of course not, right? There's no no argument, right? But it's a good example of how to use this, basically. So
yeah, so then we would basically, if there's like a higher number and therefore a 5, we discuss that in Discord and get to an agreement, right, on how to redistribute so that everybody's happy.
Right. And then, but I think, and then so we put it here because then if you keep going to the right, then you'll see the split between contributors. But so here we're not necessarily making that an open forum on the whole sheet for everybody, but it'll just be then the split is just discussed again with the people on that line, right?
Yeah.
So there's like no point in involving, say if there's 10 people here in that table, you don't have to have all 10 discussing the split for a group of 3. The group of 3 can just talk about it,
Yeah. So we're basically allocating in 2 steps, right? The first step is which team gets what percentage of the total pie of that month. And then in the next step, we're going to decide which team member gets what percentage of the slice that the team has been allocated. Right. So in this case here, the publishing team has gotten 20% in total. And we've agreed upon that in August, I got 80%. Young got 15 and Lovis got 5. And then the spreadsheet magic will tell us that indicates, or that then rolls up into, if all of these things have been filled out, we basically have a distribution, right? That I'll get this amount of tokens, Mason gets that amount of tokens, and Jason, Lovis, Young, they get this amount of tokens. And we can then use that same key or ranking that we have established for cash. So you could say, okay, this month we're going to pay out a bonus, or something we've thought about is that members can decide whether they want to get ownership tokens or cash. So you'd have some cash bonus, right, depending on the performance of the month or the revenue that we've done in the month. And then people could decide whether they want to get the tokens or get paid out cash. And so they could indicate all that. And then once all that voting is done, we'll have like a simple end result that tells us, all right, this is how these 20,000 tokens split up among contributors, and this is how it's going to be paid out. I think this is, it sounds complicated maybe at first, but I feel like we're going through this now and it's actually quite simple to do.
Yeah.
It's a good reflection also, and it gives everybody this yeah, everybody does this reflection and thinks about, okay, what actually has creative value? And everybody has to go through that every month. And I think this is also really important for people.
Yeah, I think so too. And so
As a
the
feedback
one,
loop.
right. And so the one thing that I mean, there's several things, right? This will evolve, as we said. But so, for example, one thing along the way is that we can do, or we have done, but it's a little difficult with time zones and stuff, but we're doing weekly contributor syncs where everybody, it's kind of like a stand-up meeting, right? Everybody just calls in for 15-20 minutes. We just talk about what you're doing, if you need help with anything, if there's opportunities for others to jump in, and so forth. And then just the notes from that also become a helpful record of oh, what did I do that week, right? Some people don't even remember what they had for lunch yesterday. I'm one of those people, so that's why it's also really helpful to kind of create that record. And then if somebody's like trying to not fact check it, but like, try to get some sort of well, is this consistent with what actually happened, then having some sort of record along the way is helpful, right? And so, yeah, but I think as we're doing this so we're just starting this, right? So we're actually we're going to close probably August here soon, but then we have all these months that you see the tabs on the bottom going backwards, right? Because we just figured this out this month pretty much, that's how we want to do it. And so we have to go back and kind of retroactively do the previous months from the beginning of the year. So that's of course a little bit more work, but as we get into a rhythm of doing it kind of on the spot for each month, it'll also get a lot easier, because then it's not so much, you don't have to remember back so far. It's like
just 1 month, right?
Just 1 month.
Yeah, that kind of sums up the token for now, right? Those are the ideas of the token. We really only, for now, because there's still so many moving parts, we're really early, we're still figuring out what our business model is going to be and all that kind of stuff. So we're listening to our own advice that we have written down in the tokenomics design framework in figuring out all this stuff first before we launch a token. But because we're decentralized in a way, we want to have this, or keep account of this ownership, and also incorporate that into voting rights so that we can decide what happens to our treasury.
Yeah. And the other cool thing is, so August was kind of a dead month for me. That's why I'm 0.12% sounds like nothing. But the thing is, so I've my first job out of college, I worked at a startup, right? And I got some stock options, was in the US, and the thing ended up exiting for $100 million. I wish I would have had 0.12%, right? So my personal conviction is that this DAO is going to easily be worth $100 million in a few years. So then if you think about it, like, oh man, I made like 120 grand in August and I wasn't even that active. That's fucking fantastic, right? Pardon my language. So
I haven't thought about it that way.
Well, I think about it like that all the time.
Yeah.
So there you go. Oh. Yeah, so Flow made 1.3 million in August. That's not bad.
That's pretty good. Pretty decent. Yeah.
But then, and so this is of course with the cash eligibility, right? We're putting in small numbers right now, right? But so very easily could be conceivable that there's a 10,000 or 100,000 for a monthly cash reward. And then it really becomes the things like, should I take the cash now and kind of, reduce my risk, or should I kind of keep compounding and keep taking token? And it's a fun mechanism, I think, because if the money's high enough, several people will take cash, but the other ones maybe that don't need it at the time will then get a little bit more token, right? Or actually, I guess not, right? They won't get more token that month, but more token will remain unallocated.
But since the others have not gotten it, they will get ahead.
Yeah, that's right.
So if you get 0 ownership that month and I get 1.3, then yeah, I'm further ahead of you.
Then you have more ownership than me. Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see. I'm really curious to see how this is going to go. There's also risks, right? There's also risks that people start optimizing for whatever token ownership, let's say, and which in a way, of course, is what you want to do, but of course, there's also ways to game it, where you're like, oh, I'm going to do like super small, very incremental things so that I can put something down on the sheet every month, and then I'm going to fight with everybody until I get a huge split. And like, I don't know, I do see that there's of course potential risks, but the nice thing is we would then pick this up, discuss it, come up with solutions, and then the next month the process ultimately would have been adjusted, right? So that's why I like trust that we'll figure out how to do this without turning into Lord of the Flies Island. But at the same time, I really do like the strong, like somewhat competitive, but like strongly value rewarding setup that we got.
Yeah. And I think because the groups are small enough,
Yeah,
it won't go that way.
Right. And I think that's
I think
that
Lord
is
of the
really
Flies made
key.
up, right?
Yeah.
People are not that way. People are not like that.
I think that complexity and size definitely are breeding ground for that, for dissent.
See,
and like
the European Union.
Yeah. All these yeah, very large organizations, the US federal government, like typically the smaller, like the more local decisions are made, the better, right? And so I think this is true both in government as also in DAO governance, DAO structure. So you know, if you're neighbors with somebody, if you, like you said before, Flo, if you work with these people every single day, you're not going to try to screw each other over, because you have to work with them again tomorrow, right?
Exactly.
So it's
that's it. And I think that's a really, really important thing that we somehow have to build in. I listened to this podcast. It was in German, so most of you guys won't be able to listen, but I'm happy to link it. It's this guy who's started this business that, there's like 25 people in a cell or in a circle or whatever it is. And if that reaches the 25 people threshold, they have to split up and found a new cell, a new department that they work in. And I think that's something that's really, really cool. Maybe we should do the same here, right? For teams. Like if there's more than 5 people that want to be in a reward round for a team, that we need a second team.
Yeah.
We just split them up, right? And then you always have that mode where the people that work with each other closest in a team on an initiative, they have to decide how they split up amongst each other.
Yeah, there was a lot of interesting insights in that. So the company's called For You and Your Customers, total 240 something employees in 25 cells. Average cell size is like 10 to 14, I think. They're all over the world, and they do have one local boss per cell, and everybody else is just employee, like that's it. Like they don't, there's like no hierarchy, title necessarily, none of that. So it's just there's one leader, and then the other ones are all the same in a way. And then the local leader, I guess they have a lot of freedom also on how to make. They even have a freedom on decide what they're going to do in the cell. Like what's our business model.
They don't have to do consulting. They could do something completely different, right?
Exactly. So so just because a consulting cell split and then there's a new, so then they come up with a new leader for the new cell, and then the people actually vote who they want to stay with. Do they want to stay in the previous one, or they want to go to the old one? And so it's a really interesting, very interesting concept.
And it's not just like a basic concept, right? These guys have like 17 cells and achieved like 40 million in revenues, right? So this is something to some degree, at least proven. So it's cool. It's cool how people create these new ways of operating, new org models.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And there was a good point too. So like you can see there on the map, they started Australia, and we very quickly realized that one cell in Australia is like, that's tricky, right? Because the cells collaborate, they work together. So like think of it as one is a strongly marketing focused cell, the other one does more like software development. Well, and if they're trying to do a project where they design some like an app for a client, well, they're going to need capabilities from more than one cell to do that successfully, right? They're going to need design, they're going to need a marketing campaign, they're going to need, of course, also the developers building the app. But so they have like this, I think this internal billing system will also then cells reward each other for the work they contribute. But anyway, the point is Australia with one cell all the way over there didn't really work because he said it's like a chair with one leg, right? Like you want the chair to have at least three to be, and then ideally you have 4 or 5 legs, because then if one maybe dies, then you have another one to catch up.
Back up.
Like,
Yeah.
And so of course, so very successful, but they've also shut down. They've shut down cells, but they've also cells have just basically perished, right? So each individual cell has their own profit and loss, and if they can't make money, then they don't keep them afloat. They're like, no, the cell has to die. It's sick. It's dead. So I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, I think there's lots of things that we could learn from it. Maybe the first thing we should adopt is the maximum size for our teams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we have to, we have
to
see what the number is. Maybe it's 5 or 6.
Yeah. Let's do 6. So then I don't have to extend the spreadsheet.
Oh, that'd be great. That's good.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
I think we have one last thing that we can talk about. And that's the revenue and reward distribution. So we haven't even decided on how to do this yet, but I think the idea is still interesting in that, all these different teams, people kind of want to get paid. And if you've listened to some of our past episodes, you will know about this content reward distribution that we do. And it roughly works like this. So we do a consulting project, and not all of the money that we make from the client goes to the consultants. In fact, the majority of it goes to the DAO, and a portion of that goes to a content reward round, as we call it. So every piece of content that has been published in a month gets put into a tool that's called D-Work, and then all the contributors vote on what they think was the best piece of content. So last month, for instance, we did a round on that, and we had $1,500 in the pot for this, because we're still testing it out. And I think I wrote a Twitter thread and I got like $200 for it out of that. So that's kind of how it works, right? We all decide, because that Twitter thread went viral, it had like 1,000 likes and it was successful. So it added a lot of value. Not sure if that was because of me or because of luck or the Twitter algorithm, but anyway, we put it out there, and then people could decide or can decide how we want to distribute that money that we allocated to that particular pot of money. And we're thinking of doing something similar with the existing machines and the new machines and the machine maintenance in this way as well, right? So we're going to split up the revenue that comes in. Maybe we have some revenue from consulting, we have some revenue from our Substack, some revenue from the Tokenomics Hub, and then that is then distributed onto consulting, content, the Tokenomics Hub, and machine maintenance, so to keep everything running. And we have like certain percentage allocations. It's really just a first draft. We haven't decided on this. We're just playing around with this. But yeah, that's kind of what we're thinking about. Is that we have a really transparent way of how, hey, this is what we made this month. This is our revenue. And this is how the money gets distributed among all the people. And this ties in nicely with the sheet I've showed earlier, right? So let's say we want to give 10% off of the revenue to the consulting team. And the consulting team in our mind is the team that kind of manages consulting, right? So they talk to clients and make sure that they sign up, that they're happy. They onboard new contributors onto consulting. They make sure that we can accept payment and make sure that we have templates on how to do consulting, stuff like that. And we go through this process and we decide who gets what of that. And this distribution that we have come up with here through a process can then be reviewed, can be reused in this distribution round of the revenue, right? So we could say like, okay, there's this amount of revenue that we're going to give out. And then the people who have worked on that, they could get paid for that as well. And I think that's a cool way to retroactively reward people. And I think the reason why I like this retroactive distribution is that it encourages this entrepreneurial spirit, right? You have to do something, you have to add value in order to, get something from it, right? You have to get active and create stuff to get something.
Yeah, and you have to have some measure of success with it too. That's the good, and that's also the tricky part, right? Because sometimes figuring out something that works takes 100 failed iterations. But then, of course, once it hits, then you've probably figured out something that's not trivial to figure out, and then you should get rewarded for that. But how we reward for the 100 failed iterations? That's the part where you just have to, I don't know, you just have to crunch, right? You probably get a lot less, but then once it hits, then you get a lot more. So, but that would be the exact same if you'd start your own business, right? Nobody's going to read your first 100 tweets maybe, and then eventually it picks up. And so the cool thing is that here, all the effort that people put in compounds and accrues to the DAO on some level. And I mean that in the sense of reputation, like followers count that we're building, like subscribers to Substack and all that. So these are all like compounding reference customers. Exactly. These are all compound assets that build compounding interest towards the DAO. And that makes it more attractive to work with the DAO, work for the DAO, be a contributor. And yet people providing this value do get compensated, both with ownership and with cash, depending on where they're adding value and in which way. So I think it's a beautiful idea, and it goes back to this thing initially, right? The dream of Web3, the ethos the reality we're trying to build, reward value in proportion to value that was created by the person in the group, in the project.
Wow.
Boom.
Full circle.
Yeah.
We should stop right here. Don't say any more.
No. So then let's tie it up, right? So if you hear about us for the first time, find us on Discord. We'll link that in the description. You can come talk to me and Flo. You can start this like beautiful documentation on how to do all these things that we just described, on how to become a contributor on our Notion. So join the Discord. You'll find the links to Notion there. Read through the things. You can start the process, your journey. And we're excited to do this. And like I said before, I'm fully convinced that this DAO is going to be worth $100 million in a couple of years. So
not investment advice.
Not investment advice. Purely my own fictitious ideas. And but what that really means is that I want to put in the value to make it so, right? That's why I'm saying that.
I love that. And if you think you want to use that in your DAO, the stuff that we worked on, that'd be super cool too, right? We're happy to share this and this process, and maybe we'll write a more detailed article on it in the future once we have a working mode. But hit us up if you want to try this as well. Cool. Thanks for listening.
That's it. Thank you.
This podcast was not financial or tax advice. This channel is strictly educational and is not investment advice or a solicitation to buy or sell any assets or to make any financial decisions. This video is not tax advice. Talk to your accountant, do your own research. None of this is legal advice. This podcast is strictly educational. Talk to your lawyer.